The start screen fades to black. From those shadows, a figure appears, looking at his reflection in a dirty mirror. All we can see of his eyes are heavy shadows as he stares into the glass, waving a hand in front of his face, as if he's not sure he's really there. This is the player's first sight upon beginning the game, Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2 is a game about deception and illusion. The protagonist, James, is a man who very recently murdered his terminally ill wife. It is just after those events that we find James standing in the bathroom, and neither he nor the audience has any idea what he's done. The first image we see is James, his face reflected in the mirror, not his real face, but a flipped image of it, a distortion, a lie. We can't see his eyes, the so-called windows of the soul, which are typically associated with being able to understand a person or know if they're telling the truth. And strangest of all is that gesture, waving a hand in front of his face. James leans away from the mirror and we see him face to face. He takes a deep breath, and then control shifts to the player. It is mystifying. Who is this man? Why does he seem to be psyching himself up for something? Presumably, he is setting the scene in his mind. His subconscious is developing the falsehoods it will need to keep up the delusion that Mary died of illness 3 years ago. New players don't know that. They see a grimy, disgusting bathroom, a strange man taking a deep breath, preparing himself for something. Taking control, the player walks James out of the bathroom and another scene begins. Why? Instead of having a long scene continue from the bathroom, why is this intro scene and the scene that introduces the plot split? For one, it makes the player take the initiative action. Things start in the bathroom, but nothing interesting is happening. It is once the player makes the choice to step outside that the story starts. It also develops a barrier between the two scenes, differentiating them. We are about to see two different James Sunderlands, and we won't see the first one again for a while. In the bathroom, he is developing the lie, becoming the James we will know for the first half of the game. Once outside, overlooking Toluca Lake, we meet the protagonist who will take us into town. It is a foggy, dismal-looking place. A voiceover from an unknown woman begins, after which James explains the letter and the circumstances of his arrival. It sounds grim and haunting to a new player, but it is even worse than they could imagine. This is how Silent Hill 2 begins. Not with a bang, but a heavy, all-too-telling sigh.
Are you taping again? Come on. I don't know why, but I just love it here. You know what I heard? This whole area used to be a sacred place. I think I can see why. Please promise you'll take me again, James.
James leaves the overlook and enters the woods. According to background information on the creation of the games, the long walk through the forest which James takes to enter Silent Hill is supposed to make the player feel isolated, distant from the real world, and that certainly is true. I couldn't help but make another connection. Midway in our life's journey, I went astray from the straight road and woke to find myself alone in a dark wood. That is the first canto of Dante's Inferno, the start of his Divine Comedy, which describes a man's descent into hell. This is very similar to James and his situation, in particular, the long dark walk through the wood. Throughout the woods, James hears dogs, and it sounds as if he is being hunted. Though the game itself includes no dogs as enemies, dogs are often associated with the underworld in myth. The implications are heavy. James is leaving the real world and entering hell. The first character he meets is Angela, who is standing in a graveyard outside of town. The graveyard is an apt choice. It is a place that represents death, but also loss, because this is where the living go to mourn the dead. Both Angela and James are looking for people who are already dead or gone. These characters show very strange behavior here. Angela acts nervously, fidgets, keeps her distance from James, and hesitates to speak. James displays a lack of care for himself. Here, the game sets the stage for these characters and the truths which will be revealed about them. Angela's nervous behavior around men and her anxiety will be explained, as will James's lack of concern for his own safety. Here, Angela uses the word mama to refer to her mother, and then quickly corrects herself. There is a loss of innocence, childhood denied in Angela's story. This appears again and again with her, first here with the use of the childish mama, and the way she quickly changes her tone and word choice as if she is embarrassed and ashamed. After their conversation, James chooses to enter town, but Angela stays behind. Her story is about how abuse can make a person stop valuing their own life and idealizing death. Angela does that, and the first sign is here as she lingers in the graveyard. For most people, graveyards are uncomfortable places that make us think about things we don't want to think of. Angela is very comfortable. She is obsessed with thoughts of death. When James enters town, it is completely empty and full of fog. He passes through abandoned construction and long empty roads, and though he has been to the town before, does not seem surprised by the change. This is a clear sign he is not quite right. This emptiness and abandonment will color his experience in town, including his version of the other world, which is full of dark, dank places that are isolated and cold. This is a reflection of the years in which he was isolated from Mary and had only his suffering for company. After wandering through the fog for a while, James will find a trail of blood, which when followed, leads to the first monster. There is so much blood present, it is hard to believe anyone could survive it. It must be wondered how or why the trail was left. The only kind of weapon which could cause so much damage would be an enormous cleaver, perhaps a great knife. The first monster seen is the creature which appears to be hugging itself, which walks in a strange broken manner and spits acid at James. The creature is distorted, destroyed, forcibly contained and only able to poison others. This represents the internalized anger and pain of the main characters, especially Mary and how she lashed out at James while she was ill. At this point in the game, James receives the radio. This is a staple of the series, but to James, it is also a connection to his wife. He hears her voice calling to him through broken static. Later, when he has seen the videotape, the radio will allow him to hear his wife calling again. But in the hotel, he will hear her clearly because he has finally remembered the truth. From here, the game is somewhat open. Players familiar with town can run right over to Martin Street, pick up the apartment key, and move on. But there are important sites in town which we shouldn't overlook. One of the optional sites is the Blood Swamp Monument, which includes a vague, partially destroyed description. The restored description, according to the Silent Hill Wiki, reads as follows. Remains of Blood Swamp. The X meters of land surrounding this monument was originally swamp, but was later filled in. From long ago, the swamp was nicknamed Blood Swamp, because the executioners poured the water used to wash the execution tools in here. Perhaps it's for that reason that many people seem to have seen ghosts in the area. Execution and executioners are an important staple of this game. Pyramid Head acts as an executioner multiple times, mostly of Maria. but later the creature executes itself. There is also a dead man who can be found next to a series of warning notes. There are a few lines of significance in these. The writer mentions his friend doesn't see anything in town, further proof that only some people are called to the dark side of Silent Hill. He also says that whether or not he is hallucinating, he is beyond all hope. This implies some sort of guilt, a feeling of being irredeemable, which is likely why he was called to town in the first place. But this is the best line of all. If you want to go on living, you'd be better off just sitting in the dark and staying quiet. But even that probably won't save you. If James were to stay in the dark, he would probably live, but he would not be saved. Translation: if James does not learn the truth, if he stays in the dark, he will likely live, whereas the truth is likely to kill him. But even if he lives, he will not be saved. His repressed feelings and delusions will destroy him eventually. The optional side quest which leads to Martin Street starts in a trailer near the lower streets of town. In this trailer, James reads a note that says, "I'll wait at Bar Neely's." The strange capitalization is the same as a message James finds in the bar after this. There was a hole here. It's gone now. It's likely they were written by the same person. At Bar Neely's, James finds a map which leads him to the question mark at the end of Martin Street, where a corpse with the apartment key is found. Likely this man was trying to get through. This is the same path James will try to take, which is a bad omen for James. The line about the hole has interested fans for years. There are many connections to make, from the holes James will use in the prison, to the holes which let Henry travel to the other world in Silent Hill 4. But what matters is not what the hole is, but the fact that it is gone. In Silent Hill 2, holes represent a way forward, a path to the truth. They descend into darkness, but they also pull the player closer to the light, the truth. But here, a hole is gone, and soon after, James finds a corpse. The hole is gone because the person lost. They died, and their truth went undiscovered. The player is able to explore and find multiple clues as to where to go, including maps and notes, but they are all left behind, abandoned, or found next to corpses. It seems as if no one else has made it through, a sign that perhaps James is doomed to a similar fate. Each location in this game means something to James. The town was the last place he and his wife were happy. The hotel is where they vacationed. The hospital relates to Mary's illness. So what do the apartments represent? In Silent Hill 4, we meet Frank Sunderland, James's father. There's a note in the story that mentions that Frank has been the superintendent at the apartments in Ashfield since they were built. That almost guarantees that James spent his childhood living in the apartments. Apartment complexes would represent home to James. In the apartments, we see representations of both Mary and James. James is the body slumped in front of the TV, and Mary's clothes are on a mannequin in the room with the flashlight. Most significantly, the two instances in which Pyramid Head sexually abuses a monster occur in the apartment buildings. More likely than not, any sexual behavior between Mary and James would have happened at home. When James was avoiding the hospital and mourning Mary, he would have done so at home. Once he leaves the apartments, Pyramid Head is never again seen sexually abusing any monster, though James sees him multiple times before the end of the game. What do these scenes of depravity symbolize? Has James entertained these thoughts, or worse, acted upon them? Probably not. What he has done, what we know he's done, is murder his wife. Whatever his motives, she died. Mary mentions in some lines a desire to die due to her terrible pain, but she never asks James to kill her. and James takes action without her consent. It is a violent action, and Mary fights back in the video. Pyramid Head's behavior towards the monsters reflects upon James killing his wife against her will. The sexual abuse Pyramid Head acts in symbolizes both James's act of murder and his repressed sexual desires, which were tied into his motive for killing his wife. The most peculiar room in the apartments is arguably the butterfly room, which is filled with bugs and strange lights and a hole James must reach into. Butterflies have particular significance in Japanese culture in relation to death and the afterlife. They can be seen as bad omens. Maria has a butterfly tattoo, and this butterfly-filled room is a dimly lit bedroom. The connection here could easily be seen as a warning that Maria and James's repressed sexuality manifesting itself towards her are dangerous and will lead to his death or downfall. The hole in the wall is a small foreshadowing of the dark pit into which James will leap later. All the holes which James encounters represent his general situation. To move forward, he must use the holes, but he cannot see what waits ahead of him. Once he jumps down, it is impossible to turn back, just as it is impossible to unlearn the truth once it's known. The holes are representative of the fact that learning what happened to Mary will probably destroy James, but there is no way to turn back now. He must continue moving forward to the truth. In the first puzzle of the game, we have a reference to 3 people: Henry, Mildred, Scott, the 3 scratches on the wall. Note that there are 2 men and 1 woman in the trio, just like our 3 protagonists. Almost all the puzzles will follow this pattern. Silent Hill is a place in which time does not really exist. As a place outside of normal reality, Silent Hill has no need for clocks. Yet here is this ornate grandfather clock with a great big chime and a strange memo. The scars from the past shall remove the nail that stopped time. On the surface, the scars are the marks on the wall. But we've also said that the 3 names relate to the 3 main characters. Every set of 3 in the game can be connected to Eddie, James, and Angela. So what could this line mean? Angela, James, and Eddie are all stopped in time. Their lives are over. What they have faced has stopped them from moving forward. Their scars, their pasts, are what keep them immobile. They are nailed to the ground. They must escape the scars of their pasts in order to live again. In the coin puzzle, we also have the number 3, 3 coins: the old man, the prisoner, and the snake. The religious imagery is telling, and is stated directly in the riddles: the seducer of she, creature of Hades, further from man and closer to lady. But the lady in this puzzle is called the prisoner. Again, we only have 1 woman. This woman resembles Angela and is found in the mirror room in which Angela hands James the knife. The old man coin is James. Of the 3, James and Angela are the only fully human characters. Eddie eventually becomes something twisted, someone who enjoys killing. He tries to tempt James to kill as well, saying they are the same, that the town called to both of them for a reason. He is the tempter here, trying to convince James to revel in the same depravity he does, which makes him the snake, the creature that is not human, who has a reputation for pulling people to the dark side. What are old men? Wise, learned, respected? Yeah. But they are also celibate. Old men are past their prime, beyond the age at which sex is either possible or considered normal. In one of the riddles, he is described as rotting. In the hardest difficulty, he is referred to as having all hungers sated, i.e., no sex drive. Before he can leave the apartments, James enters the stairwell, which leads to the exit, and comes face to face with Pyramid Head. This will be the first time he has to fight the monster, but it isn't really a fight. The point is for James to survive until Pyramid Head leaves. Then, Pyramid Head exits the building, and James follows after. They use the same exit, the implication being that James is following Pyramid Head. This is the start of Pyramid Head transforming from an enemy into a guiding force. He is leading James to the truth. Once he escapes the apartments, James finds himself in the fog-filled streets of town again. It is here he meets Laura for a second time. We first saw her when she stepped on James's hand and ran off in the apartment building. In both situations, there is distance between her and James. In the apartment, there were cell bars between them. In the street, Laura's up on a wall. Laura represents innocence, and at this point, James is quite guilty. From here, James goes to Rosewater Park, the place which he believes may be his and Mary's special place. Instead of finding Mary, he finds Maria. Maria's appearance is clearly reflective of his feelings for Mary. He misses her, so his delusion manifests as her double, but his repressed sexual desires, refused for so long, manifest as a more sexually extroverted, assertive Mary. The change from Mary to Maria is also interesting. The name Maria is not as commonly associated with the same holiness and reverence that the name Mary is in English language. It's a much more common first name, while Mary maintains a bit of distance and divinity. That makes Maria much more sexually available because she is an ordinary person and not a holy being. Within Rosewater Park, there are a series of statues which relate to the town's history and the story of the game. One of them honors a man named Patrick Chester, honored for fighting and dying in the Civil War. The Civil War was that of blood against blood, one nation against itself, a divided nation, just as this game deals with multiple divided selves. There is a monument to one Jennifer Carroll, which is described as a victim of persecution who shall never be forgotten. Though Jennifer was related to the Order, in this game that connection is not known. The only implication is that of an innocent woman brutally murdered. The third memorial reads, "In memory of the 67 who died of illness and now sleep beneath the lake." The bodies are in the lake. Won't that be a pleasant thing to remember when we're rowing our way across it? Illness is of course what took Mary from James, and the lake is the dark place that symbolizes the hidden truth and the danger of knowing it. James may join these bodies in the lake, in the in-water ending. From Rosewater, James and Maria go to Pete's Bolorama, where Maria waits outside. She is never seen by any of the other characters besides James. James goes in and finds Eddie and Laura talking. While we see Laura with Eddie and James, and Maria speaks about Laura, Angela never comes into contact with her or seems to know she exists. Angela, who was denied a childhood, is the only character who does not interact with the young girl. James and Maria chase after Laura, entering Heaven's Night. Maria gets them in using keys she has hidden on her person. Heaven's Night is a strip club, which again associates Maria with both sex and situations in which men view women as sexual objects. From here, Maria and James follow Laura into the second level of the game, Brookhaven Hospital.